All right, so here we are in histologyguide.org, and we're going to look at the samples of cartilage. And these samples of cartilages are usually just structures, tissues within a larger structure. They don't make up an organ itself, but you'll see the samples, trachea, epiglottis, ears, right? I'm not concerned about the actual organs or anything. We're just looking for that cartilage tissue, right? So the first one is a hyaline cartilage slide. Right? And this is a sections of the cross section or the longitudinal section of the cartilage. And from looking from back out, you see these big purple oval structures right here that are distinct from the surrounding tissue right here. That is your hyaline cartilage, right? So we're going to zoom in on it. And you could see, first off, we've already gone over connective tissue proper, right? On the outside right here, you have fibroblasts and collagen fibers making up the dense connective tissue, some kind of fibrous tissue on the outside right here. So the cells right here are fibroblasts, the fibers are collagen, and that's surrounding the cartilage tissue, right? And at some point you start to see it get translucent right over here. As it gets translucent, this is the first part of the cartilage. This is called the inner chondrogenic layer of the actual cartilage, right? And it's going to contain chondroblasts. These are the immature cells of cartilage, right? The mature cells of cartilage are called chondrocytes, and they're a little deeper in within the cartilage. So with bone and cartilage, cells are sitting in a little cavity or a little space called a lacuna. Right? So the cells are over here, and the space over here is called the lacuna. So we're going to look at an electron microscope picture of them right here, right? So this is kind of what you're looking at a little better resolution. Here, in green are the chondrocytes, cartilage cells, and then the space that they're sitting in right over here is the lacuna, right? So a lacuna is a cavity or a space that these cells sit in. And so that's what we're looking at when we're looking at these things. All right, any questions on that part? So that's cartilage, and this is in particular hyaline cartilage. The characteristic of hyaline cartilage is that the matrix is pretty clear, right? You don't really see any fibers or anything running around over here or within this tissue right over here. All right, so cells are the chondrocytes, structure is the lacuna, and it's also got this outside covering called the perichondrium. That's a fibrous tissue, like a dense, irregular connective tissue. All right, so that's hyaline cartilage. And then elastic cartilage is the next one. And this sample is the epiglottis. And it looks a lot similar to the hyaline cartilage from this view. This is in the back of your throat. This is the external part facing your, right above your larynx, right here. So this right here is a stratified squamous wet lining, and then you have like a connective tissue underneath. There's some glandular tissue, there's some adipocytes, and then you get to your cartilage, right? And this in particular, this is elastic cartilage. So here's the perichondrium on the outside. These are the fibroblasts covering up, and then here are the cells in the lacuna, the chondrocytes in lacuna. And for this elastic cartilage, you could make out the fibers running through the actual tissue here, right? So from afar, it kind of looks like that hyaline cartilage. It's stained kind of the same color, and the fibers aren't super distinct. But if you go to this page 2, right over here, the Verhoef stain, which stains the cartilage fibers, then you see a different picture right here. Okay, again, just for review stuff, here's the stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelial. This is the connective tissue, the fibrous connective tissue underneath. There's a couple fat cells, then you get to the fibrous layer of the cartilage right here. And so over here, this is a little more distinct, all those elastic fibers running through the cartilage tissue right there. Right? So this gives the cartilage a lot more flexibility. Right? Like your ear is made of elastic cartilage, and that's why you can sleep on it all night and it'll bounce back into shape in the morning. So here's a sample of your ear, actually. In this case, the elastin is stained red. Right, so it's a little, actually, this is a little cleaner sample right here, but you can see these are the elastic fibers running through it. These are the cells, and the space is called the lacuna. Right, this layer right here is your inner chondrogenic layer over here, and then the outer fibrous layer is the outer with all the collagen right there. So those are hyaline and hyaline and elastic cartilage. And the last one is fibrocartilage. This is one of your intervertebral discs. And this is basically a mix between cartilage and dense regular connective tissue. That is, it's got a lot of collagen fibers arranged within it, right? So here the cells are a little more spread apart. There's always a single cell per lacuna or per space right here. But this is the chondrocyte. This is the lacuna. Everything else you see around here are the collagen fibers that are running within them. All right, so this is fibrocartilage. All right, so that is your cartilage. Chondrocyte, lacuna, right? That's what they're sitting in right there. And you can see with the, especially with the hyaline cartilage, a lot of them are kind of closely linked. You'll see a bigger space with a couple of them in there, but each cell has its own little lacuna. All right, so for our bone stuff, as you can see on the chat slide, there are 3 slides that I'm going to have you look at. One of them is spongy bone, a sample of spongy bone. And let me go to my lecture slides for a second. When we look at the structure of bone, right, any bone is going to have an outside layer of cortical or compact bone, right, that's going to be on the outside. It's going to be very dense. It's going to be a lot stronger. Here it is on a long bone. Here it is on one of your skull bones right there. Right? On the inside of your bone is what's called spongy bone, sometimes referred to as cancellous bone. There's another name for it too. Right? But this is compact and spongy bone. Compact on the outside, very hard, very dense. Spongy bone is very porous. Right? So each one of those little holes right there are the pores. Okay, so those are the 2 types of bone tissue. They're made of the same material. It's just they have this different structural arrangement. And here's the cartoon version. This right here is the compact bone. This is the spongy bone. And you'll notice for compact bone, it's a lot more complex, the shape. You can see these complex shape here, circles, and these longitudinal, this is from the cross section, sorry, and the longitudinal is a little less, more harder to tell, but from a cross section, you can see all these circles right here. And then this on the inside is the spongy bone. All right. This is a section of your spinal cord. Right. This is the vertebrae that surrounds your spinal cord. These are all the muscle tissue around it. These are your spinal nerves going out there. So you got a bunch of different tissues in here. We want to focus on these structures right here because this is your actual vertebrae, right? This is the posterior part. This is the anterior part. And then you got this space in between them. So on the outside, you have a more like a thin layer of compact bone. everything on the inside here, all these little struts and everything right here, this whole inside right here is spongy bone. So you have these black dots right here is actually bone marrow, but these struts right here are called trabecula, right? And this is considered the functional unit of spongy bone. They make up the structure of the inside of the bone right there. So you got these long struts. On each of those structures right here, you have osteocytes in a lacuna, right? Just like you had chondrocytes in a lacuna for cartilage, you have osteocytes in a lacuna for bone. Okay, now bone's going to have a lot more unique structure, but for this spongy bone sample, I want you to recognize the tissue, which is spongy bone, and I want you to recognize these structures, which are trabecula, and then there's the osteocytes in lacuna. All right, so that's a spongy bone sample. So now we're going to look at a couple of this section right here of some compact bone, mostly on the outside here. So you have what's here, a longitudinal section. That'll be like a section like this, right down the middle, and then the cross section is going to look something like this. Okay. All right. So this is that longitudinal section, and if you looked very closely in it, you'd start to see the cells, and the cells are going to be in a lacuna, right? So these are osteocytes, and they're in a lacuna. The structure, like any of the shapes and sort of fine detail, you can't really see in the sample at all, right? So this kind of looks a lot like cartilage, like hyaline cartilage almost, with the exception that this has blood vessels running through it. Cartilage is completely avascular. So if you see blood vessels, that means you're looking at bone tissue, even if it's something that looks like this. Okay, so here's one sample of bone, and then the cross-section view is going to look a little more something like this. You're going to have a lot more structure because you're showing this stuff right now by the time you get to a cross-section. And so you're going to see a central, what's called the central canal. Here they're calling it a Haversian canal. And the blood vessels are going to be running in there. And then you're going to see these rings, right, running around that central canal right there. And then within those rings, you'll see the osteocytes sitting in their lacuna. Right, so this is what's called a decalcified long bone. This means that all the mineralized matrix has been dissolved away and only the living tissue remains. So most of this is cells, blood vessels, collagen fibers, whatever the mineralized matrix is made of. So this is not super distinct, but you could usually tell by these either blood vessels and these circular things right there that you're looking at bone. But really, you want to look at a sample that looks more like this, right? Because this is either what's called a ground bone or burnt bone preparation, where they removed all the organic material, and the only thing that's left is that mineralized matrix and all the structures that were there. So here's that central canal we were looking at, right? And then the circles around it, which are called lamella. And then embedded within those circles, those layers, are those spaces, the lacuna. Right, this is where the osteocyte would be sitting. Remember, I showed you this right here. Here's the chondrocyte, the cartilage cell. Out here, again, is the rubbery matrix. Oxygen, nutrients can diffuse through this because it's mostly water, and the cells can live off that, right? They don't really need much. They're adapted to low oxygen, but that's how they get it. It diffuses right through the matrix. So here's a similar picture of a osteocyte sitting in the bone matrix, right? The bone matrix is not watery. It's completely mineralized, and nothing can diffuse through this matrix to get to this cell. This cell is actually highly active, right? It stays active during your whole life. and it needs a lot of oxygen and blood and nutrients. So, but nothing's diffusing through here. So with bone tissue, right around the lacuna, you're going to see these canals, right? These little bores through the extracellular matrix, and the osteocytes arms, these little cytoplasmic extensions right here, travel through these little canals right here. These little canals through the matrix are called caniculi. Right? They're the spaces. These are the osteocytes protoplasmic extensions. All right, so these guys are going to, what these are doing over here, let's look at this again, right? These little squiggly lines over here are the canaliculi. And you could click on them here. These little squiggly lines right here are the caniculi. And you'll notice they're all kind of moving down toward this central canal. Remember, the central canal is where all the blood vessels are. So they're all kind of reaching down toward this. They're also connecting with each other so they can communicate with each other and share nutrients, right? Because all these cells over here, they go off and they connect with other cells, other osteocytes through gap junctions. So that's what these little lines are, right? So you have lacuna, you have caniculi, you have the central canal, you have lamella, and you have the whole thing. This whole bullseye thing is called an osteon. That is a structural unit of compact bone.